I got a phone call from my mom asking if I wanted to go to the gym. I said yes. She said, "I love you." I said, "I love you too." 8 seconds later, the ice broke and all three of us, fell in. One was able to self-rescue. Me and the other boy were 25 to 50 feet out from shore. There was no way, unfortunately, that we could get back to the dock. I had drowned about 10 minutes later. A local firefighter rushed out on the scene to come save me. He stuck a pipe pole down, which is a long pole with a big hook at the end used to tear drywall down in the fire. He had searched the area before, but he heard a voice saying, "Go 2 feet to his left." So he did. He stuck the pipe pole down and he found me. I was underwater for 15 minutes. They rushed me to the local hospital where I lay dead for an hour and 8 minutes. My mother by then had arrived at the hospital, and they did not call time of death, which is a very uncommon situation, but they waited for some reason. She went up to my feet and prayed, "Holy Spirit, give me back my son. Please do not take my son." And instantly I had a pulse. 16 days later, I walked out completely fine. 40 days later, I was released from all medical personnel and doctors. There is a book called Breakthrough, and there is a movie starring Chrissy Metz, Dennis Haysbert, big casting lineup called Breakthrough.
Wow. Well, that's a 30-second snippet of literally a miracle, and I see Sam and Coach both shaking your head, and myself as well. And so, talk to us about John. I know you told me the story earlier, and you were on our podcast, and you talked about the room, the doctors, your mom. They talked about the temperature in the room changing. So, talk about that.
It's weird because it was a different situation altogether. Like I said, there was about 15 to 30 personnel inside that little medical room, all working with me, trying to get a pulse back. They were doing everything scientifically and medically possible that that everyone knew, whether you were a firefighter, a paramedic, anybody. And what was weird is when my mom walked in, they said that not just the atmosphere in the room, like the feeling in the room, but the physical temperature in the room started to rise. They couldn't explain it. And when my mom prayed, there were three people that had a pulse on me. One was on top of me, and then two were on both sides of me. And they had different locations of where they were trying to gain a pulse from me. And when they said my mom prayed at the end of my feet, that something so powerful rushed up me that it pushed all three of them back. And to verify this is that one of those gentlemen, he's about 6'7", 280 pounds. And he was the gentleman that was on top of me doing CPR. And it pushed him physically back. That situation is just one of the many miracles that happened in the story of Breakthrough.
Man. If you haven't seen the movie, definitely check it out or read the book. It's crazy. So Cuonzo, when you hear something like that, man, what's your thought? Like, what are you even thinking right now?
Just really, it goes back to Proverbs 3:5, trust in the Lord with all your heart and might and lean not on your own understanding. And that's what I felt in my spirit, just as he was saying it. And I did see the movie. It gives you hope. I think more than anything, and just respect, to be strong, to never give up, and just the strength of his mom to consistently pray like that, pray with power, pray with precision, and pray relentlessly. And I think that's one thing in our society, not to jump off track. I think that's where we're missing a lot of prayer. And I think that's why we struggle as a country today.
Yep. So talk about that. So that's one of those things at work, one of the values of our firm is faith. And I've heard people say before, like, Brett, man, you've got God on your website, or you've got this, and it's like, you're not supposed to do that, and it's like, well, no, that's what we're about. That's what we do. And so, but when you hear that, you're a big Division I SEC basketball coach, but I know you're a man of faith. And so how is that you go out and still lead your guys out on the court, but yet have your faith and you're okay with that, with the team?
Well, probably 13 years ago, I totally gave my life to the Lord. And so that's how I live my life. And now, again, I respect the space that I'm in, and my players know what I feel and what I believe in. And they understand that, and they have their right to do what they believe in. But I think one of the things that gives me peace when I pray and I lean on the Lord, it gives me structure and it gives me balance. And I think we all know without those two things that you can lead a life of chaos. So for me, the structure and balance gives me strength to continue to move forward. And those are the things that I talk to my players about. And I'm not ashamed to say that I love God and I appreciate God. I respect God, but it also gives me the strength to say to my players, I love you and I love what you guys are doing. But also in the same capacity, let those guys know I'm unhappy with you as well. And they have comfort in knowing that I truly care about them because I have an open heart to love.
Yeah. So that starts with relationships, right? I mean, if they don't know you don't love them, then they don't feel safe. I mean, intimacy, all that kind of stuff, you got to have it.
Well, I certainly think it's relationships, and I think that's first and foremost. But part of relationships and what I do, just like similar to what my sons, but I raise my sons. But part of what I do with our players is about having relationships. But in order for us to get where we have to go, sometimes that relationship can be uncomfortable. In order for us to live a life of comfort, because I got to get you out of the comfort zone to push you to wherever it need to be, not just on the court, but off the court, because we're also developing life skills. There was still, though my mom and the people around me did a great job in raising me and helping me, but there was still life skills that I needed to learn. When you're talking 18, you're trying your best to get to 22 to 25 to 30, because in hopes that one day those guys that I coach, they will be successful husbands or fathers. So they still need the necessary tools to be successful in that realm.
Right. Because I would say that's almost as important as anything, right? Because obviously, and I know you guys got a ton of players in the NBA right now and some of them in the playoffs, but the percentage, right, of those guys making it to the NBA is much smaller than them becoming the fathers and husbands and all the stuff they need to become.
It is. And the thing that what we try to do, and my brother-in-law said this, and it really stuck with me. And I've always said to our players, life isn't fair. And I'm not saying that just what ratio. I'm not talking in those terms. I'm talking in what we do in our sport. Everybody wants to be an NBA player. And I always say life is not fair. And like my brother-in-law said, you have to work beyond fairness, work beyond treatment. So even if you feel like you're being mistreated, work past that. And that takes a lot of resiliency and commitment. And you have to be able to do that.
That's right. So let's go on to family, the next F in the F5, if you will. And let's talk about that. Sam, you obviously have a family. You are a wife. You have 2 children. And yet you have this very successful company, creating the world's quietest, smallest breast pump. I mean, amazing. Again, doing great work here in St. Louis for our startup community as well. But just all the things that you have to balance between, one, I want to be, mom, right? You want to try to win that Mom of the Year award, but yet you want to be the wife of the year, but also the business person of the year. So how do you balance those things with family and your business?
Yeah, for better or worse, everybody wants to talk to moms about how they balance and kind of work-life balance and what that looks like. And, for me, it really comes down to prioritization. So I don't get right now with everything in my life to have 5 Fs.
Right.
I get to kind of have 2 things.
Yeah.
And those are the 2 things that I have to prioritize above all else. All right. I choose to, right. So for me, the 2 most important things in my life are my family and my business, in that order. There isn't a lot of time for fitness. There isn't a lot of time for fun. There isn't a lot of time for laundry. All of those things that I remember that I used to be able to do, I don't always get to do. And that's okay, because I am deriving satisfaction and fulfillment in the most important things for me. And I think probably one of my biggest gifts is that I am okay with the things that can't get done, or the buckets that can't get filled today, because what the buckets that are getting filled, the 2 buckets, are more than enough for me.
Right. And I think, how did you become at peace with that? Because I know I'm guilty of that, is beating myself up over, if I'm doing really well here, well, then this fitness bucket's dropping, and then I beat myself up, and then I think I got to go, run an Ironman next week. I can't actually.
So I'm blessed with an abundance of self-confidence. I think that helps, right? And I think just kind of knowing I'm going to be really hard on myself in these couple areas, and that means that I have to be gentler on myself in these other areas, or find ways to fit them in, right? So I'm kind of one of those people that had a gym membership forever and never went because I couldn't find time. So I finally realized it took a pandemic for me to connect these dots. Yeah. If I can get a spin bike in my basement, then maybe I can start kind of slightly filling this other bucket at weird times of day. And I'm not relying upon someone else's schedule or babysitting or opening hours. Yep. And so some of it's being creative, and some of it is just kind of waiting for the time to arrive. And some of it is saying, these are unapologetically my priorities, and this is what I am doing. And these are the 2 goals that matter most to me right now. And it's okay that those goals might change in the future, but today, these are my priorities, and I own them, and I'm proud of them.
Yeah. And I think too, it's our culture, but the hats off to you for being a working mother and doing the things you're doing. And it's tough. Right. And so
The
you see the
pandemic has not been good to working moms.
say that again.
The pandemic has not been good to working moms.
Exactly.
Not made life easier.
It is not. So I just say hats off to you on that and being able to balance all that. And so I would come back to you, Coach, because I know you've got a wife and kids as well. And so you've got a lot to manage and you have a very stressful calendar. Obviously, it's probably been back a little bit, but you're not traveling as much, I would assume. But so talk to us about that. How does that family role come into play when you've got such a demanding schedule?
Well, I respectfully say COVID, of course, a lot of deaths, a lot of anxiety, stress, worry, loss of jobs for families. But for me, the great part about it has been the time I've been able to spend with my family. So I want to be respectful to all the lives that were lost, but to be able to spend that time, because I got in this profession in 2020, and I've been playing ball ever since I left high school in 1990. It seemed like I've been going 90 miles an hour, because you rarely get a chance to be at home for Thanksgiving breaks because you play the sport, Christmas breaks, maybe a day or two here. If you had a tournament, then you weren't getting home. So summertime, you really couldn't go home because you had to work on your craft on campus, continue to get better. And I had worked summer jobs. So when I got in this profession in 2000, again, it seemed like it was nonstop. So this is the first time since 2000 that I had a break, so to speak, this long of a break. And it allowed me to breathe because, again, I'm grateful to be in this position, but man, it's exhausting because the amount of hours you spend. And just really when it started, we started back, good or bad, but we started back eating dinner at the dinner table as a family. You know, it used to be somebody's at the TV watching, my daughter's on the phone, you know, this my son's, but we were actually at the dinner table together. And for me, that was a great feeling to have a family there to do that, because again, we're going so fast and then you lose sight of the little things and eventually they'll be gone. And my oldest son is 23. My other one just left for college at 18. Now it's my wife, my daughter, she's 13 now. So here shortly she'll be gone. And so I want to try to value this time as much as possible because you never know when it's checkout time for you.
That's right. That's right. Anything around the dinner table, this is for all three of you, but anything around the dinner table that you guys have done as a family that maybe you can share with our listeners in the future, but the people that are on Facebook Live now, anybody got anything you can share?
I can share this one. Now, we've talked about it. We haven't been consistent with this one. Yeah. We talked about playing, now you guys probably played this before. We talked about playing spades. It's a card game.
Oh, yeah.
You listen, we talk about that. My daughter's 13 because we, you know, my wife and I, we did it growing up. We played here and there, but spades and dominoes, those are, so really,
that's awesome.
After dinner, play some spades and dominoes. So we got to get to that. We never really got around to it because just you go and you eat dinner, and my daughter, she want to get that phone right away and go upstairs and do whatever. But spades and dominoes, those are the two things we need to get to.
I was just saying that the other day. I went to school at Eastern Illinois University, and you know, euchre's a big game there, right? And so I'm like, man, my kids don't know how to play euchre. I got to teach them euchre. So, how about you, John, Sam? Anything you do around the kitchen table, whether it's a game or even just while you're eating dinner? Anything?
We've done a lot of Monopoly. My 5-year-old addition and subtraction. Over that was kind of
the longest game ever.
Man, it is.
We play until he cuts us off, or basically he either wins or lose. And if he thinks he's losing too much, he's done because he's 5.
That's right. He's done. We have to take pictures, like, to make sure nobody's going to be stealing money or taking somebody's property or something. You know, it's like, what's going on here? How about you, John? You have a wonderful family. I think your mom is on here. We got people saying hi from Brazil. I mean, all over the country on Facebook. So it's pretty cool. So if you see my disclaimers, if you see me over here doing something, I'm managing this Facebook thing over here. I'm not checking text and checking out. So, but John, anything for you around the kitchen table?
I mean, you know, it's kind of a little bit of everybody's situation with my schedule and my mom's schedule and my father's schedule. It's all kind of, you know, scatterbrained. But we've been very blessed to be able to have family dinners, kind of along with Coach. You know, COVID, you know, being respectful and all, but it has opened the opportunity for us to be together, just the three of us as a family, just sit down and have a warm meal and just be able to connect and, you know, have that fellowship. But, you know, that's just, it's a simple thing, but it's a very heartfelt and genuine thing.
Yeah, we do. And we're not perfect at it either. But one of the things we do, again, having 4 boys, it's crazy at our house. And we're normally running around from practices to games and, you know, all over, just crazy schedule. But is now, like you said, having those dinners around the kitchen table is what's the rose, what's the thorn, right? What was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? And what can you learn from that? And it's funny, even my youngest who's 6, they start to realize, right, some bad things can happen and it's not a failure if you learn from it. So spending time on that, I think is crucial, but this time of slowing down has been phenomenal. I mean, it's also very sad. All the things are going, especially, our Metro East area where we're at here, they just shut the restaurants down for inside dining today at 11 o'clock. So, all those people, I think of Chop House downstairs to the people that work there, it's just terrible. So there's a silver lining, but there's a lot of bad stuff going on as well. So Sam, I'm going to call on you now for your, let's go to the firm, or if you will, the work side of things, right? And so what's that one thing? And if you've ever read the book, One Thing, it's phenomenal, or Essentialism by Greg McKeown, phenomenal book. What's that one thing for you that you got to do no matter what today has to be done?
Oh, I don't have one thing. I have a startup. I have 10,000 things.
Good point. Good point.
And it will often boil down to one thing, but that one thing changes every single day. In a company that's manufacturing a medical device, it could be anything from, marketing to manufacturing to legal, kind of everywhere in between. The most important thing that we do is engage with our moms, but that doesn't mean that we do that every day or that that's the most important fire to put out every day. It's the most important thing we do, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other pressing things that we have to deal with on a daily basis.
So talk about that a little bit, about your backstory. You went to Wharton School of Business. You worked at ESPN out in Connecticut. I think you were out there, if I remember correctly, 8 years-ish, somewhere in there.
9.
And you decided to, all of a sudden, I'm going to start this thing, right? This thing. And you didn't even have children yet, I don't believe. So you hadn't gone through the process of that. But walk our listeners through the mindset of that and how you just think, yeah, I can create the world's smallest, quietest breast pump.
Yeah, our origin story is kind of not what you would expect. Everyone assumes, oh, you had kids. Oh, you used breast pump. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, you created a new one. And that would have been a very reasonable thing for us to have done, but that's not what happened. From the majority of my time at ESPN, I was actually part of departments and and I had jobs that didn't exist before I had them. So very early on in my tenure, ESPN changed the way they did data and stats across platforms. I was part of the team that was always figuring out how to leverage the sports content assets into new platforms. And so I was very much bitten by this kind of chaos bug. I love chaos. I love uncertainty. I love figuring things out. And I had actually left ESPN to follow my boss at the time into a consulting company he was starting that would basically advise startups and entities looking to enter the sports space. And I was on a ski trip with my husband on the East Coast. I like to say we were living real lives. It was lovely. We had no kids. We had good jobs. Life was good. And I happened to open up the New York Times app on my phone, and I saw an article that said, shouldn't the breast pump be as elegant as an iPhone and as quiet as a Prius by now? And to be very honest with you, I did not know what a breast pump was. Again, didn't have kids, thought at some point I wanted to be a mom. I thought I wanted to be a working mom. I thought maybe I wanted to breastfeed. That was the extent of my knowledge. But as I was reading this article, it just kind of became one more thing that women had to deal with, working women, working moms. And I got really angry, and I saw my future flash before my eyes, and I shook my husband awake, and he's a very gifted engineer. And I said, Jared, can you believe blah, 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 and climbed up on my soapbox. And Jared basically opened up one eye and said, oh, breast pumps aren't that complicated. I can build one. And 5 years later, here we are.
Yeah, so I don't know if John or Cuonzo have that talent. I do not. But so walk us through. So go from, and we've all read a bunch of articles, right? Everybody on here has read a bunch of articles. But how do you go from I'm going to do that, I'm going to build that in the middle of the night, and then it's now a real company here in St. Louis. You move back from the East Coast back home to St. Louis, and now you're impacting the world, impacting women's lives.
It's not an easy thing. Some of it was just this complete belief that we were and are making a product that would make women's lives better. So, there are hard days, and on the days that are the hardest, at least for me, it helps to think about the women that have reached out to us, because we've been very fortunate that women across the world have said, if I had your product, blah, 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 I could have done this. And so when, problems seem hard to solve or unsolvable, or you have a bad day, everyone has a bad day, right? For me, I kind of think about these women whose lives we can make better. And to me, there are very few things more rewarding and better than having an impact on somebody else, right? I can use our breast pump, but I'm one person. If I can have millions of women use a breast pump and I can give them time back, if I can, improve their wages because they're not hiding in a closet instead of working if they want to, to me, that gives me goosebumps just thinking about the way that we can help other people. And so that's kind of what's kept us going, right? It was having this idea, and it was then socializing the idea. I mean, that was really the important part is, hey, I have this idea. Is this a good idea or a bad idea?
Right.
Would you use this? Would this help you? And then, we did a Kickstarter campaign and we got a ton of press and a ton of positive feedback. And ever since then, just hearing from people, from women, but also from men, the biggest surprise for me was how men could be affected by a product like this too, be it cleaning, be it seeing their wives with their clothes on, which in some cases is not always a bad thing. And so, that just that impact piece. And some of it sounds a little bit arrogant, and I don't mean for it to, but just the ability to make somebody's life better is what keeps me going and what has, I think, really propelled us forward.
I won't get into details, but I can think of the trip to Disney World, when I think we had 3 kids at the time and my wife was breastfeeding and, going into the restroom and all the stuff you have to do, right? It controls your world. Cuonzo's, he's shaking his head. He remembers the days. So Cuonzo, question back for you is the same kind of thing. It may not be that one thing, but I always like to talk about the one thing. And so what is that for you? When you wake up and you put your head on your pillow at night, if I follow you around every day, what am I going to find you're doing day in and day out?
Well, obviously I think about my family all the time and everything I do. And in between, whenever I get up, it's some nights are sleepless nights, so between 4 and 6 when I get up, of course, prayer, whether I'm listening to some via phone, reading something, YouTubing something. And I try to live by Bishop T.D. Jakes and Miles Monroe. Those are the 2 ministers that I listen to all the time. But for me, it's just really trying to maintain that I think I do every day outside of loving my family, but just try to maintain a level of humility because I learned power without compassion is dangerous. So I always want to try to maintain a level of humility. And same thing I say to our players, as you continue to climb the ladder in whichever it is in the world that you operate in, fight for humility, because for some strange reason, we think humility means weakness, but that's a level of strength to have humility. So in everything I do, because I'm in a leadership role, I want to maintain humility, respect, and honor for the people that are around me, the people that work for me and work with me. I want them to feel like we're part of a team and not that this is a boss and I have to operate a certain way because of his status, but I want them to understand I'm just like you, because I learned a long time ago, life can put it on the flip side. Now you're at the bottom of this life. What type of person were you when you're on top of the world, so to speak? So I always want to try to maintain humility.
Yeah. I think especially for you got the world's watching, right? I can't speak for John and Sam, but yeah, I don't have the cameras follow me around or the press follow me around waiting for Cuonzo to make one dumb comment. Right. And so, and that's the world we live in, but it's amazing to me how you stay so humble and you stay such a strong leader. And does that impact you at all?
I think so. And, but I also understand what I really fight for. And I don't think I have fully yet, but I try to live and understand my purpose on this earth. And so I fight for that, to understand that and to gain wisdom. And I continue to seek counsel from God. And I talk to him as if he's my father, not just like, hey, sir, can I speak with you? I talk to him in a relationship all the time, because what happens too for me in the world that I live in, sometimes you can get so depleted by what was left behind or the last thing, it's hard to continue to push forward. Yeah. So you have to have the strength to keep pushing forward, because it's not, again, I'm moving a team. I have a family, but there's also a team of young men that watch my every move. So I have to be accountable for all my actions. And there's a level of discipline and commitment that you have to operate in every day until the buzzer sounds. And for me, the buzzer sounds when they put me in the casket.
So, John, sorry, I was reading this note here. John, let's talk about your fitness. Let's go to that next F in our life here is fitness. And so talk to us about that. I know right now you've even got a personal coach, maybe trainer, and you're doing some things. And so talk to us about that, why, how important that is to you, and Sam and Cuonzo, you guys can chime in as well.
I mean, for me, it plays a lot of parts in my life. Specifically, I do travel for Breakthrough still. COVID put a little wrench in it, but I still travel, and I also work a full-time job here in Missouri. So I work 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, and then I'm on the road in the weekends. And fitness for me, it's it's my stress reliever. It's, for that hour, hour and 15, I can just really hit the iron hard and, let it all out, the frustration, the anger, and for me, it's that important. In college, I let the freshman 15 hit a little too hard. And I came home and, mom started cooking for me and I started to see that I was losing some of that weight. And I had always wanted to have a personal trainer. The people that I got to know really well through the process of breakthrough all had them. And so it was just kind of like my goal to, hire one day. And I went to high school with my trainer and he's been doing a great job. And, just for me, it's a stress reliever and also, our body's a temple, and I like to just make sure that I'm accountable for that. I don't, want to let myself go too much, but I also, want to be able when I'm 40, 50, 60 to be able to play with my kids and, not want to break a bone every time I stand up. So
I think he just called us old, Coach. When he's old and 40, he doesn't want to break a bone. If you played golf with Cuonzo, he almost breaks a bone every time he swings a golf club. So, Sam, you talked about your fitness life, and you've got your bike in the basement. I've got my Peloton right over here. It's in my office. What I found is with the busy schedule, I don't get it in, and I give every excuse in the world. I don't like working out late. I don't like working out early. So I just said, let's put it in the office and I'll find time throughout the day to do it. So you got to create that environment, right? So Coach, for you, we'll call him out because I think I don't know if he's still on here or not, but Chris Hollander was on here and you guys are walking a lot. I mean, so talk to us about your exercise and maybe you guys got a little contest going, you and Chris.
Well, for those that don't know, Chris is a guy on my staff. He's done a tremendous job in our program.
And a guy I grew up with.
He's a man of character. Well, we don't necessarily have a competition. It's just holding each other accountable. Now, I don't know if he told you, I think Chris has lost at least 60 plus pounds. I mean, he's lost a lot of weight. He's done a tremendous job. Now, he's walking, 10 miles a day.
Yeah.
Now, and so I have to ask him, hopefully he's not on here. I have to ask him, is he getting any work done? He's doing all this walking. So, but no, but he doesn't, see, he used to lift weights and get some walking in. I try to do both, so I don't get as much walking in as he does, but he's done a great job, and he's again, a man of high character.
That's awesome.
Can I make one point? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first is that I've already admitted fitness is, lower on my bucket list, or my list of buckets. But, I found that if you do phone calls and walk outside, it gets you not only some sunshine, but some moderate exercise. So for those people who are maybe listening in and are trying to fit everything in like I am, I found that to be really helpful. And then the other piece that I try really hard not to neglect is mental fitness. Physical fitness is really important. And, even for someone like me who doesn't get nearly enough of it. But I think mental fitness, taking whatever brain break you need to restore and rejuvenate yourself, I think is really, really important.
So what's that look? Sorry, go ahead, Coach.
Sam, how do you do that with your job and having children? How do you get that space to do that?
Well, so the kind of one thing I do for myself is that I have to watch some amount of TV. It can be 5 minutes, but I need to be able to turn my brain off and let it kind of reset. So I am kind of admittedly a TV junkie. I love to read. That also helps. And this is embarrassing to admit, but I'm going to admit it in this call. Crossword puzzles on my phone. If I have just a minute to just type them in, I find that to be very soothing. It's very random.
Well, it's good for the brain though, right? It's challenging.
It's challenging, but it's also just kind of taking a minute and putting whatever is percolating in my brain aside. I find that just to be very helpful.
I like it. So how about meditation? Does anybody meditate on here? No?
I tried. I can't.
Stresses you out. Yeah, well, I'm a big meditator, and I got my 6-year-old hooked. So it's if you find time for it to slow down. Because if you're like me, I don't ever stop. Right, I just keep going. And so for me, it's that 5 minutes. Can do it through the Headspace app or the Peloton app, and that 5 minutes for me is a big deal to lower the heart rate, chill out a little bit, and be able to kind of see what's going on, be more in the moment, be where my feet are. Right.
So now, Brett, so you saying within that 5 minutes, you just kind of you relax and just listening to whatever the sound is?
Yeah. So they'll come on and kind of tell you what to do and what to say, right? If you follow Headspace or Peloton, they'll walk you through it. Because if I just said, I'm going to sit in this chair for 5 minutes and breathe and look out the window, like I'd be 4 miles that way thinking about something else. And so what happens is they'll say, okay, bring your center breathing back, right? And so it has been so good. Sometimes, a lot of people don't want to admit that they meditate or talk about it. But for me, it's been so helpful with anxiousness and just, running around and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm a big believer in it, and just starting to do those 10 and 15-minute ones, which I never in a million years thought I'd be doing it, but been doing this for about 3 years, and it's been very, very helpful. So
Headspace, right?
Headspace, yes. Andy Puddicombe, if anybody knows him, I've been trying to get him on this podcast. So send him my way if you know him. Sam, you're in the startup world. See if you can make that happen, will you?
LinkedIn, cold emails. They work.
All right. LinkedIn and cold emails.
Cold DMs too.
Exactly. That's how half my guests come on the show. So let's talk about this. So let's see. What advice would you have for somebody that may be struggling either believing in themselves or betting on themselves? And we can go a round table discussion here. What advice would you have for people?
Advice on whether or not they believe in themselves or trying to believe in themselves.
Yeah, just maybe what advice could you give them to help them believe in themselves more? Maybe some things if go ahead.
I think first and foremost, you have to have faith within yourself. And I think without faith, you have to look at it like you're powerless. I think you can say, because if you don't believe in yourself, then how do you, like I say to our players, you have a chance to be anything in the world you want to be, because you can visualize it, you can dream that. But I said, if you don't believe it, why do you expect me to believe it? So you have to make me believe. And I think that's the biggest thing. You have to, but you also have to give comfort to be a listening ear to help people navigate through life, to give them a peace of mind to continue to push forward. Because sometimes, again, your past can, and I say this word respectfully, your past can cripple you from having strength and having confidence and believing, because you can get beat down mentally so much, and then you don't even believe in yourself. You struggle to look in the mirror.
Sam, John, anything?
I mean, it's just, kind of going with Coach, in a world today where we see nothing but chaos, it's very easy to, have that mentality of, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do next. COVID's happened, my job, like Coach mentioned earlier, my job's at risk, and it's so hard, but having that belief in yourself, knowing that I can make a difference in the world, I can impact the life daily. One thing that I've always done for myself is, with Breakthrough, with having, the Christian faith and who I am, and being able, I talk to people daily. And for me, it's just been this aspect of realizing that every person I encounter, every person that I talk to, I'm giving them a little piece, a little nugget, so that they believe in themselves, whether it's their situation, whether it's honestly like being a little beacon of hope. In a world that's chaos, how can we be the light to help another person eventually become their own light, so that it's like a train method, as I could say.
Sam?
Yeah, so many women, and this is a proven fact, this is not me speculating, suffer from imposter syndrome. And I don't, as I mentioned earlier, abundance of confidence, while trying to be humble.
That's right.
But for me, I talk to a lot of women who are kind of struggling through the imposter syndrome. And what I always advise people to do is to kind of take a step back and think about, the things that they're good at and the things that they're not good at. And everyone has things that, we're good at. We all have things that we're not as good at. And so for me, kind of in times of crisis or an uncertainty or in a pandemic or in a startup or, anything, it's kind of going back to those fundamentals of, this is what I am good at. And these qualities are kind of have what gotten me to where I am. And so if I find myself in a place of uncertainty or despair or confusion or whatever, I kind of can go back to those things that I'm good at, and I can figure out how those tools can help me get to the next thing. And so it's, certainly you need to believe in yourself, but, I often get asked about kind of the tangible pieces of, what do you do? And so I always ask someone, what are you good at? What are you proud of? If you were to tell someone, if you were to kind of write in a vacuum where no one would ever know it was you, what are you good at? What are you proud of? What do you do well? That's what you focus on. And those are the tools that you need to solve any problem or make any change. Because, when we're adults, there's always things that we're working on, but we're fully formed people,
Yeah.
we can't, we should acknowledge the things that we're not good at and take steps to make them better, but they're never going to be the best things about us, or rarely going to be the best things about us. And so how do we kind of take these pieces that we are our strengths and really figure out how to leverage them and use that to make our lives better.
I like it. So I'm going to open it up for questions. I got another page and a half of questions here. And one of them actually was, what are you most proud of? But I'd like to open it up for anybody here on Facebook that wants to chime in, ask a question. By all means, type away. And while I'm waiting here and buying time for a question, I'll ask one right now while we're waiting is talk to us about books. The best book you've read, what would you recommend? If somebody said you only have one book to recommend, and it can't be the Bible, because that's what you're going to say. It can't be the Bible. What book would you recommend? Cuonzo?
I've read quite a few. I think I would have to say right now, I read Martin Luther King's book. I read Malcolm X's autobiography. I think that, I don't have one, but I would say books that are easy reads. All of John Gordon's book. I've probably read all his books. Now, Energy Bus is probably my favorite. I still kind of go back and forth with that one. Jay Billis had a book called Toughness, but it's hard to say one book because there's so many, and it's a lot of learning. So I wish I can't give you just one.
All right. The Energy Bus is good, though. It's on my top 4. John, you got a book?
For me, obviously, I'm in college, and so I'm a church leadership major, and part of the courses we have to take a course called Sociology of American Youth, and it's basically just a class to understand future generations. And one of my favorite book is just Generation Z. The aspect of how do we relate to that generation? How do we help that generation? The impact. It's different now that they're 3 and 2 years old having an iPad in their hand compared to when I was a kid. I had Goodnight Moon in my hand. And so it's just, that book's really key to me because, since I talk to youth every day, just how do I relate? How do I help them out? That book was one of my favorites because it brought a lot of statistics that I never really thought of, just things that were completely out of the box.
Yep. Sam?
So my favorite, book, and some of this is situational, but it's What Do You Do with an Idea? It's actually a children's book. And, I'm kind of all about how do you take this concept and nourish it and bring it to life. And I really enjoy that book. Yeah.
What do you do with an idea? I like that.
What do you do with an idea? I believe the sequel, but I might be wrong, is What Do You Do with a Problem? Obviously I'm in a stage where I'm reading a lot of children's books. And I read a lot of adult books too, but they're all very embarrassing and probably not really helpful from an advice standpoint.
Not the ones we're talking about here on the Circuit of Success, right?
Exactly.
Well, again, if you're listening and you want to ask a question, by all means, type away. A question for you. This is for more Cuonzo and Sam. Because John, you mentioned earlier you're in college. So my question is, if you could give yourself advice, go back 10, 15, 20 years. And John, if you've got a thought on this as well, by all means, chime in. But what advice would you give yourself 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Go ahead. No, right up there. I think there's 2 pieces. The first is that where you start does not necessarily have to be where you end up. And I think kind of recognizing that you're going to take twists and turns that you don't see coming, and they could be good things. And then the other piece, though, is kind of recognizing that decisions you make early can affect you later on. So anything from a starting salary to a level of a job to the amount of money and, terms that you take in a startup, right? It can be kind of anything. But kind of recognizing that, one, you're never boxed in, but things can be tied together.
Cuonzo?
I would say, and this is probably not as specific, but I'll get to it. But my wife and I talk about this all the time, and I heard Bishop T.D. Jakes say this a long time ago. But if you save your children from trouble, you will rob them of their destiny. So, and going through whatever it is I went through, and I've seen some things in East St. Louis growing up, and I experienced a lot of things. Some things you probably don't want to see as a young guy, but I lived that, and I wouldn't change any of that because I think that's what part of what made me the man I am today. So I think as parents, And when I talk to parents, especially their children in sports, you have to allow them to grow through pain, trials, and errors. That's what allows them to grow. And if they can go through discomfort, and I always say, you want your children to have discomfort. You want the rain to come down when they're at home because you have that protective umbrella. Once they leave your home, they no longer have that umbrella of protection. So you have to equip them with the necessary tools while they're under your umbrella. So when they make mistakes, you can talk them through it. Because once they leave the home, you're hopeful that you did everything that you need to do as a parent to equip them with the tools. So for me, it's the same thing. Just I'm glad my mom, we lacked a lot of resources, so we had to, scrap and make things work. But I learned some lessons through all of that.
Good. Thank you for sharing. So Joyce on here says, what have you guys learned during this quarantine? So any big learnings? We talked about the family time. That's a big deal. But what have you learned either about yourself or just really, I guess, about life? Thanks for the question, Joyce.
Can I start?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've given talks on audacious optimism and just kind of how framing things can make such a difference. And there are so many horrible things about this pandemic, and I don't want to make light of them, and I don't want to minimize them. But I also think that for most of us, for many of us, there's a real opportunity to not view this as, a year lost of our lives, as opposed to an opportunity to really see things differently, right? I've loved having the time at home with my kids. I did not love sleeping less because I was up till all hours of the night working and trying to make it work. So this was not, a picnic. But I think that in almost every situation, there is a bright side or a silver lining or something good. And at least for me, kind of as I've seen people go through this pandemic, you can kind of tell who is the optimist.
Yeah, you can.
And who is not. And, for me, I look at this as a gift. I think, everything that's happened, good or bad, is a gift. And it's been hard, but it's also been in some ways really wonderful.
Yep. John, what about you?
This quarantine has really, opened my eyes on just the importance of remembering family time, no matter what the situation is, or I should say, no matter what the age is. Me obviously being in college, just getting out of high school. I remember, my high school, I was not, as soon as I got my license, I was just not around. I had my car, I was gone. And, this quarantine's really just, really brought back the importance of, seeing my folks, seeing my parents, seeing, my fiance's family, just taking that time to, invest not only in yourself, but in your family, because, we're not promised tomorrow. We're not promised that, we're going to be here tomorrow. And just, that simple, I love you, that simple, thank you, it can go a long way.
Yeah, I think too, real quick before you go, Coach, is John, you and I were on the phone last night talking, and I said something about, it was an aha for me. I said, unfortunately, home from college, missing that experience. And it was really cool, your answer. And I don't know if you remember what your answer was, but you flipped it in a way that was so positive. And to your point, Sam, is, not being pessimistic about missing that year of college, right? You turned it into an unbelievable opportunity. And I thought that was really, really cool. So, Coach, what about you?
Well, the thing for me as you experience COVID, it helps you understand you have to value your time and your resources, because eventually you will run out of both. And I think that is the biggest thing. We have to value that time, value the resource that we have, because eventually they'll both be gone.
So here's a question from Chris Hersey. He says, with new unemployment, so Monday, August 31st, what goals should we look to accomplish or expect in a new career for balancing happiness, specifically with the 5 Fs? So what goals should we look to accomplish or expect in a new career for balancing happiness, specifically the 5 Fs?
I could read some for that and just have some right here. And I think happiness, you find happiness. And I don't think that when you start looking for happiness elsewhere, and I'm not an expert on happiness, but when you look for it elsewhere, it's hard to find. But I have this written down. If you lack confidence and happiness in private, you won't have any power in public. You won't have any peace in public. If you're a failure in private, it's not them, it's you. Because you think about it, there's no one there but you. So you impose that, you inflict up on yourself. And you have to really believe that. I think your happiness comes from within. Even in relationships, you seek relationship for happiness, then you're not going to be consistently happy because you're seeking something that you have to find that within. I think that's very important to have an inner peace to move forward.
You think sometimes when you in our minds, we can say, when this thing happens, right, I'll be happy, or when that thing happens, and it never changes, right?
I think it's important to recognize that, especially in times like this where there's such high unemployment, and not everything is going to be in balance all the time. You may have to take a job that you don't want to take, or that doesn't give you that satisfaction that you wish it did in the short term. And then maybe you're able to fill your fitness bucket or your family bucket or whatever it happens to be. And I don't want to be all Pollyanna and sunshine and happy and say, oh my gosh, you should, wait and get whatever you can get, or,
Right.
you should have these categories or these criterion and you should only, adhere to them. Things are tough right now. And, we all may have to make choices that we wish we didn't have to make or don't want to make or uncomfortable making. And I think that's why, it's not one F, right? I think there's all of these other pieces that combine to make you a whole person, no matter how many Fs or whatever letters you have. And so I think recognizing that not everything is going to be perfectly in balance all the time.
Yeah. And I would say, just piggyback on that, I think when you talk about those 5 different Fs, you're absolutely right. So one could be a 10 on a scale 1 to 10, one's a 1, one's a 3, one's a 7, right? And so I think that's important. I call it strategic think time. My black journal, it's with me everywhere I go, is constantly spending time thinking about where you're at in life, right? So the more I can journal, the more I can write down, and then I can check in with myself, right? How is my faith life going right now? Well, you look at March and April, all these times, well, I'm not even able to go to church, right? So my bucket might have been a 2 or a 3. Well, I got to get to work on that. And if you slow down to speed up and you spend time with the journal, you spend time with your mind. I know, Cuonzo, you've talked in the past, that 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning time frame where phones aren't coming in, the texts aren't coming, phone calls aren't coming. If I can slow down and spend time, and I would challenge people to grade yourself on your faith, on your family life, on your work life, right? Firm for me, on your fitness, and on your fun bucket, which we're going to end with, is how are you doing? Scale yourself 1 through 10. What's it look like? And then what do you got to do to get better? What do you got to stop doing? What do you got to start doing? And what do you got to continue to do? Start, stop, continue. And if you can do those 3 things, I think you're going to find that life's going the direction that you need it to go. So I'll shut up because I'm not the guest here. You guys are. But talk about that fun bucket. We joked about sometimes you just got to have a little fun, Cuonzo, and sometimes I got to give you a little FaceTime call at, 11:30 at night and have a little chat. And so what's that fun bucket like for you, Cuonzo, John, Sam? What do you like to fill the bucket with?
I think for me, just spending time with family and whatever that is. I don't necessarily have a script, but these are things that make me happy. I truly feel what makes me happy is when my family's happy, when I have a peace of mind, when I'm able to, and maybe because of how I grew up, but if I'm able to provide for my family and see smiles on their face, and not buying a lot of things, that sort of thing, but just to happiness that way, to be able to provide, that brings me happiness, and it gives me peace. But there's not a lot of things that I have to do this to make me happy, because again, if I'm blessed to live a long life after coaching, my goal is to live somewhere where I just got peace, maybe out in the pastures, and just a peace of mind. That makes me happy. So I don't need to be kicking up a lot of dust to be happy. As long as I have peace of mind and my family around, I'm good.
That's awesome. John, what about you?
I mean, for me, it's kind of just piggybacking off Coach. I mean, I just, you have, for me personally, being in the spotlight of, Hollywood cameras and, doing all these things. For me, it's honestly, like we were talking about yesterday, coming back home to Missouri from college was probably the best news that I could ever give my family. That I can be here for, my brothers, my nephews, my mom, my dad. And it's simple, but, I think as I get older, I just start to realize how, money and all that isn't, number one. But, thinking about the importance of spending time with my family and realizing that, hey, I'm not only growing as, myself, but having them alongside me to push me to be a better version of myself is just, it's probably the most fun thing that I can do is just continue to learn from my parents as I'm continuing to get older.
Love it. Sam?
So I think everybody's, buckets are different. With however many letters or numbers or whatever you have, and for me, this is an F, is friends. I as a female entrepreneur, I can tell you that I don't get through what I'm doing without friends, without other women and men that I can call and be vulnerable with and problem solve with and talk through and blow off steam with. That's kind of the one piece that we really didn't talk about. And my family's wonderful. I love my family. I love my business. I love my coworkers. I have a wonderful team, and I'm so grateful that they are on this journey with us every day.
Yep.
But kind of the last piece that for me makes me complete as friends.
Yep. And I just an asterisk to that. So that bucket for me is filled with friends. So we have a very active, neighborhood and a friend group, and it's just, I think about experiences too, right? What experiences can you create for your children, for your friends, for your family, and just enjoy the moment. So making sure there's no last questions in here, but I just really appreciate all of you joining me today to give back to a community. Like I said, I know you've got a lot of things that you can do, whether it's in your startup, you're chasing movies, or you're chasing recruits and coaches and whatever you're doing. It's just been awesome to be with each of you. Any parting words? Anybody want to say anything before I sign off here? Anything that I didn't say or didn't ask that maybe you wanted to add?
If I can read this just for our listeners, because I know we always go through something. This also gives me strength. God sends giants to reveal you. He sent Goliath to reveal David. He wants to reveal your discipline, your fight, and your tenacity. So times get hard. Keep pushing forward.
Keep pushing forward. We'll end right there. That was awesome. Hats off to each of you. Samantha, John, Cuonzo, thank you much. Thank you so much for being with us. And thanks to our listeners. If you got any questions, let me know. But thanks so much for being on the Circuit of Success live on Facebook today.
Thank you.
Thank you.